Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Chris Bircher, Director of Technical Services here at CTC, and today we are going to go over the Hive installation techniques and go over the different installers that we have and the process is to install them both manually and via command line or a silent install to make sure that everyone using Hive is comfortable and familiar with the installation process. Before we begin, I want to encourage all of you to ask questions. Whether you're attending live today, use the questions panel, please. I'll be monitoring it. Or if you're attending or watching the recording on YouTube, ask in the comments down below. We monitor those as well. We want to make sure that you all understand everything that's being discussed today, and if you have any questions, that they get answered. So with that said, let's just jump right into it. Now, over the last year and a half or so, we at CTC have been making some significant changes to our installations and how our products are being installed on your devices and on your machines, and how you can be making those available to your end users. The very first thing we did a little over a year ago is we consolidated the number of installs. And now we have what we like to call our unified installers. And that in turn enabled a whole bunch of additional features and changed up a bunch of things, which is why I feel the need to present these webinars now. So today we're going to talk about everything that is changed, make sure you understand everything that you're getting when you run your installs, and how to get them configured to be as efficient as possible. So with that, today you're going to understand, hopefully understand what the differences between our two installers are, because there are two, and what the options are, how to walk through it manually, what you can do within the installs and within a scripted install for that matter. We're going to walk through both installation options, not just the scripted one, and then have some time for additional Q&A at the end. Before we get into all of that though, let's explain a little bit about what we have. So first off, there are now two installers to choose from on our website. I'll show you this here in a moment. There's a single user install and there's a multi-user install. You may be wondering, well, what does that mean? Single user is the installer that does not require administrator privileges to install. The reason why it does not require admin privileges is because everything installs to the individual user's profile. So whoever's been logged in on the machine at the time the installation was run, they're the only person that has access to those files or to that program. The multi-user installer does in fact require admin privileges, and it will be available to the machine. So anyone that logs in will potentially have access to that program. Now, and I say potentially because Hive CMS requires a login. So if you don't have a login, you have the app, but you can't use it. So it just kind of depends on a little bit of extra stuff going on at the end, which are covered in other videos on our YouTube channel. Today, we're just talking installs and setup. Within those two different installer types to choose from, we have two different ways to install those. There is the interactive install, which means you get to see all the windows pop up and pick and choose what you want to install and how you want to install. You click next, you accept the license agreement, next finish, and away we go. The silent install or command line install involves a script. And you can then control, that way users don't necessarily see anything popping up in their face. It just kind of runs in the background, but the install is happening if there's additional files that need to be copied around for various settings or licensing or what have you, those can be included within there at the same time. And it can be bundled up with other programs to install at the same time or sequentially. All right. So first off, the interactive install. Really, the way it works is you would go to our website. If you don't have the files already, go to our website, log into your portal, download the files that you need, whether it's the single user or the multi-user install. Extract that zip folder. In some cases, depending on what your internet settings are, or where else you may have downloaded the file from, you may need to go through the right-click it, go to the properties, and unblock it. That happens periodically. I don't really know any rhyme or reason why sometimes it does it and sometimes it does not. So it's always worth checking, especially on zip files, or especially on anything that you download from a website. And then if you run through the install, right? Step. If you choose to take advantage of the project activity logger, or as we call it, PAL, there's another file that needs to be downloaded from the portal as well, and located in the licensing folder. We'll walk through that. And then there's a single post install option to run a repair if for whatever reason something's acting up, or something interrupted the install and you can't, something's not working as expected. We can run a quick repair, see if that checks it out. And I'll show you about that too. So that's it for the interactive steps. So we're just going to walk through it. I'm going to show you a little bit here real quick before we jump into the command line installs. So let's just do this. All right, now on our website, if you go to ctcsoftware.com and you click the little profile icon up here to get access to the portal and log in if you have an account. If you don't have an account, you can create one on that same page, and you'll get access to your CTC portal. On the projects tab is where you'll get the option to go down to settings and grab the config file. The downloads to all the products are over here on the right. If you click this green downloads button, you'll see the BIM suites, the SIM suites, and Hive. So you can download Hive here. Come over here. If you're going to use the project activity logger, make sure you get the settings and the config file for it. Project activity logger will not work without this config file. It's almost like its own little license file. If you don't have it, it's not going to work. And those are kind of the two things that you got to grab from the website first and foremost, at least the installer. Then decide where you want to install from. Right? So I've got mine just here in my demo folder, and I've downloaded everything. So in your download folder, once you've extracted it, you will have one of the installers, depending on which one you've downloaded, and all of these 3 PDFs. Now, I'm going to take a step back and show you the install page. So if I go to download installers, it'll look like this. You'll see Hive, you will see what the latest and greatest version is that you're downloading, and then you'll get to choose which installer you want to work with. Again, single user installs to whoever is logged in on the machine at that moment in time. I will add, if you do have a script for this, because you can, and you use the run as administrator call on that script, the administrative account on that machine is the account that will get access to the Hive and PAL and anything that was installed with that script, not the user who was logged in. So running as an admin doesn't work on the single user install as you would expect it to. You just run the install. Run as admin is required for multi-user, not single user. Just want to clarify that, because that becomes a question quite often. Okay, I've got everything. Let me go back to my window here. So you will get the installer. There's also this CTC accounts AD synchronizer. This helps synchronize user accounts from your corporate Active Directory system into the CTC portal. It's very nice if you've got a large number of users, and instead of you manually entering those in or trying to import them in via a spreadsheet, there's a utility that can help you do that. If you are using SSO and you've enabled that with us at CTC, you will not need the AD synchronizer tool. And then there's documentation that explains how to set all this stuff, whether it's just the Hive installation, the project analytics installation, and the CTC accounts AD sync installation. It's all here. I recommend you read through it. Everything that I'm talking about today is included within these PDFs. All right, now I'm just going to quickly step through a single user setup. It's exactly the same visually as the multi-user setup, with the exception of the name of the installer. Step one is here. It tells you what versions of Revit and or Civil 3D and or AutoCAD, depending on the product or what you use, this is supported in 2020 through 24. And you keep on going. If you've already got stuff installed, you got to get rid of it. So here's a common thing that happens frequently to individuals that are just trying to run an update or install for the first time and weren't necessarily paying attention to what they were downloading. Since we do have two installers, a single versus a multi-user installer, that applies to all of our products. If you have one install type on your machine and you try to use the other one, so for example, in this case, I've got multi-user and I'm trying to install single user. You can't do that. And our installation window tells you, hey, we noticed this. You have multi-user suites installed, and here I am trying to install the single user. They're not compatible with each other. You can't do that. So you got to pick one and get rid of it, or pick a format and stick with it, right? So because I am doing this on purpose, I'm actually uninstalling the other two right now in the background so that we can walk through the single user installer. And then I'm going to actually do a deployment of the multi-user one here momentarily. So I'm going to back up. And actually, you know what, just to be sure, I'm going to cancel that. Yeah, let's go ahead and cancel. We'll finish it. Great, fine. And now we should be good. There. Okay. Now we are going to give it another attempt here. Moment in a second. Come on. And there we go. Okay. So now it's gonna let me do it. There. If I hit next, now I get presented with the license agreement, right? I got rid of my other products. I'm good to go now. So you want to accept this. I suggest you read through this. There's a lot of good information in there that you want to read. Hit next, and that's it. You just hit install, and you will end up with Hive CMS and the project activity logger and our project standards, all at the same time in one shot. Many of this, a lot of those settings are controlled in the portal, and I will point those out here momentarily. And then at this point, you have the ability to go ahead and check or launch Hive right now, launch the installation configuration guide, or take a pause and go do something else. All right. At this point, the only other thing I need to do is locate my Hive config file for project activity logging usage, and that goes into your licensing folder, which is stored here. Go to your C drive, go to users, public, CTC software, and we have a licensing folder here. That Hive config file needs to be stored here, and I've already got it here because I forgot to delete it prior to this session. But you physically have to place that here. It does not do that for you. And then last step, to confirm that the project activity logger is working, after you've installed the Hive package, there's a utility on your computer called the PAL configuration. If you just open up the Windows search bar, you can type in PAL config, and it will present you with a PAL configuration. This is how we test the config file to make sure that it worked and make sure that it's connected up properly. You hit test, and you've got the files located properly here in the licensing folder. It should say it's successful. If you forgot to download the file, it'll tell you the test failed because it couldn't find the file located in this folder, and it tells you the folder path as well. So if you forget any of that stuff, this window will remind you. Then you click save, it'll close it, you're good to go, all said and done. And that is the interactive install. It's pretty straightforward and easy to set up. So if it's just you, or there's just a couple of you that are going to be working on with Hive and with Project Activity Logger or PAL, it's a pretty easy setup. Not a lot there you need to worry about. And then the last piece that I want to point out to you, I just go ahead and open up my control panel, is if, like I mentioned at the beginning of this, if something appears off with your setup, whatever that may be, you do have the opportunity to run a repair. So by going through the control panel and programs and features, when you select our Hive product, you can run a repair. It's just going to fire up the installer and effectively rerun it again to make sure that everything's okay. I did notice, and I guess I'll mention this as well, for whatever reason, when you go through apps and features, you don't get repair here. You just get uninstall. I don't know why Windows does that, or why the modify option doesn't turn into repair. But if you did need to run a repair, you still can by going through the good old classic control panel. Okay, now let's talk about the next item on our list today, and that is the command line install, or a silent install, as we more typically call that. This begins off the same. You download the files, unblock it if needed, extract the zip folder, locate where you want to keep your installers, download the config file from the website. Then we create an install file. And in my case today, what I'm going to show you guys is how to create a bat routine, which is effectively just a file we create in Notepad that calls the appropriate commands to run the install and to copy my config file to the proper location on my computer. Then we'll run it as administrator to make it happen. If you're using a product like some type of software deployment program, Software Center, PDQ, or I'm sorry, whatever Microsoft is calling it now, because it's not the same as before. It's not Software Center, it's software, I don't remember. At any rate, you can deploy it via any of those types of applications. And or PowerShell scripting and whatnot. All right. Before we get into building that, though, there's a couple of things I want to talk about and point out. Here are some of the basic calls that you can use. So the primary string we're using is the MSI exec, or MSI exec /I for install. This is the install, or this is the command to call up the MSI. The /I is the install part. If you were trying to use a script to uninstall it, it would be a /x. Then you put the product in. In some cases, you would need to include the entire file path, or so I'd have to put the network location here and all the other folders and whatnot. But you'll see when we do our script that I've done a directory change on that. So I really only just need the installer. The /q at the end says, do it quietly. No user interface, please. There's a couple other additional switches you could throw in there, depending on whether or not you wanted the users to see that an install was happening. So we could have it put up a progress bar or a basic UI. So there's additional switch options in there. Step 2 to this is the config file for PAL. I can copy paste that into its proper folder if I have it, and then anyone that runs this utility or this batch routine that I'm creating will get Hive installed, and they will get the config file placed properly. Simple as that. All right. And then I've got an example. So this is kind of what mine looks like. So I've got this CD call in here, which actually changes the directory from, I think it's like you're somewhere on your user folder, and I'm changing it to go to my install directory on my C drive, which is ctemp installs 24.5 prod. And then because I changed the base directory of the installer, that means I can just worry about putting the MSI's name in there and not have to put the entire file path. Simplifies things a little bit, at least, you know, for me and for if you're just going to give out the bat file to install. All right, so that's good, that's good. And then I always like putting a little timeout in here, just because I usually marry these up with other install packages or installers. For example, I'm installing Hive, I'm installing my BIM suites, I'm installing my SIM suites, and then I'm doing a bunch of other settings, copies, and back and forth. So I usually put a timeout for like, with a 1, it's like a minute. Well, maybe not even that. Just to allow the installer to finish before moving on to the next installation. That's all that's for. All right. No, not thank you. We're not done. So now I'm going to show you how we did that. All right. Let's do this. Where'd it go? There we go. Oh. Okay, here we go. So we've done the downloads. Let me get up my working folder here. So I've got a couple of different things. I've got an example that I want to show you, and then I've got the overall thing that I'm going to show you. Here we go. All right. So I've downloaded everything here. I want to create my bat file now. So a couple of different ways to start this. It's just a text file. So you can right click new text document. You could also open up Notepad or Notepad++ and start there as well. So I'm just going to call it CTC HIVE install. And we'll do 24.5 because that is the latest version at the moment. And it's not a text file at this stage, right? I mentioned in the PowerPoint, it's a .bat for a bat routine. If you're renaming a text file to a .bat, you're going to get this message about, are you sure you want to do this? Yes, you are sure you want to do that. Now, I can go ahead and script this out. So I'm going to right click this, and you can either edit, which will open it in Notepad, or if you have Notepad++, launch that. That is a free application. And what I'm just going to minimize some of these other tabs here real quick from AutoCAD stuff. And I've got two things here I want to show you. So this is what it'll look like, obviously blank Notepad. Here's an example that I've done already. So this is similar to what I'm going to do up right now. I have the beginning section that I like to do personally, which helps make, in my case, I'm just running it so it shows up in the DOS window. So I tweak the color of the DOS, and so it's not black and white, it's white and something else. And then here's the change directory call to move it to this folder so that I don't have to worry about typing in a much longer file path potentially within the installation name. So now that I've got my directory set to this, I can go ahead and build out the rest, which ends up being msixec/I for install. That's the main important piece. And then making sure that you spell or copy paste the installer name across properly. So instead of me trying to type it, I'm just going to do just that. I'm going to copy paste it. Select the text there from the installer, paste it in between my quotes. And I use quotes all the time, but you really want to make sure you're using them here just to make sure there's no extra spaces or anything like that. It helps a lot. Especially like up here, for example, I had to include this in quotes because there's spaces in the names and you can't have spaces. So putting it in quotes takes care of that. And then we'll do the /Q at the end to make sure that it's silent or quiet. Next step is to get my config file into the right place. So I can either insert my timeout here right now to make sure that my installation finishes before I start getting ahead of myself for any reason. And that's okay. You can do it now. You can do it later. And then it's a copy. But before I copy it, if you've never used a CTC product before, it's quite possible that maybe for whatever reason your licensing folder isn't there yet. Or maybe you're doing the copy paste before you install Hive, because that's possible too. You want to check to make sure that the folder is present, and if it's not, make it, and then we can copy the file to that location. And that's what this whole long piece is down here. So I'm not gonna type that in manually and potentially spell something wrong, because I've done that. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy paste it across. And so the config file that we're working with, the Hive config file.json, always will live here behind the C users public CTC software licensing. If this folder isn't generated yet, we need to make sure it's there. So it's checking. If it's not there, make it. Okay. And if it is there, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to say, okay, cool, we're good to go already. Then we do the copy. And the copy takes the config file that we've downloaded and copying it from wherever you tell it to copy from. In this case, I'm copying it from my installs folder where I've got various other settings files. And I'm pasting it then to the licensing folder that I just either made or checked to make sure it was present. And then I can either insert another timeout, or I can put a pause in which requires me to click a button to exit the installer, which is actually what I'm going to do, just so that we can see that it's finished. And there's other things you can do to make this a little bit more presentable. And by presentable, I mean, if you're just going to write a bat routine to give to your end users and let them install it, when that happens, they will see a DOS window that pops up. And where you see these little echo comments, those are notes that are presented in the installation window so that people know what's going on. So right now, the first thing they're going to see if they run this is CTC Hive multi-user installer 24.5. So now they know an install is happening. And then down here, they won't have any idea that files are being copied until it says it was successful, and then press any key to continue. So if you want to show that things are happening, or that a different process or different part of the task is happening, you can put that in and type your own, echo space, type your note. And then I can say CTC project activity logger settings being copied, or something along those lines. I don't remember what I wrote in the first one. Copying palette configuration file. Okay, perfect. And I'm actually going to change, and I'm going to put this in there too, because I like the way that looked. So we'll just go pop down here, do that. So we're going to get some notes that says installing CTC Hive CMS and PAL. Then it'll install. Then it'll say CTC project activity settings being copied. Then it's going to copy them. And then at the bottom, we can do another quick little echo that says CTC HIVE installation complete. Right? Done. Oops. And that's it. So when it comes to installing Hive, it's there's not a lot here, thankfully. It's pretty straightforward. You get and you're going to get everything you need. So you save the file, and because I had already made it a bat file, I just had to save it. Now I can close it, and now I have my installation file here. I can give this out to anyone, and really anyone that has access to this folder on my C drive now could run my routine. And to make that run, you do a right click and run as administrator. But before I do that, real quick, because I want to, I am going to delete that licensing folder here on my C drive so that I can show this being created when it's done running. All right, so here we go. Right click, run as admin. I get my DOS window over here, but it looks like this because of how I set it up. So here it goes, telling me installing CTC HIVE CMS and PAL, doing its thing. Then I put up, here's that pause I put in, and then it's saying copying our CTC project activity settings being copied, one file copied, installation complete. And now press any key to continue. That's it. So it's pretty quick even. And if you look over here in my CTC software folder, I now have my licensing folder back, dated with 12/32, which is when we ran it. And if I open it, there's my config file. So everything worked out splendidly. And if I open up my PAL configuration utility again and hit test, checks out. We're all set. We're good to go. Everything's all done. Hit save, close it out. Last but not least, there's a couple other settings that I want to point out before I let you guys go. The first one being some of the settings that are defined within that PAL config file or that Hive config file. When you go to your projects tab and you hit up the settings here, before you download that config file, there's some additional settings here that you may care to have. If you're using PAL to log data about your Revit project and some of this in the user's sessions, you may or may not want some of this information, like what Revit add-ins are installed on that session. Do we want to check for audits when people are opening their files? Switching views. If people are printing, do we want to get print details and print info or not? And then warning information. Do I want just a summary of the warnings that are in these individual files, or do I want detailed information about each and every single element and each and every single warning? 9 times, I would say I would probably stick with summarized, just because you get the warning and you get the element IDs of the objects in the warning, right? That's good information. This one spells it a little bit further and tells you, the warning, the IDs, and each individual name and object and what's hitting what. So it's spelled out a little bit better. It does take more space up in your database and in your reporting files because it's more detail. For me, I get all the information I need in the summary, so that's what I use. But you make sure you check or uncheck what you need and don't need, save it, then download your settings. And then last but not least, with the settings, I should say, before I forget, on the CMS tab, there are also some additional settings that you may want to configure prior to deployment for your new users, because there are some organization and user settings that are applied, specifically the user settings that get applied prior to first launch. These can be changed after the fact on the user's machine, but if you wanted to provide a good default for them, you need to make sure that these are configured, before installing and allowing them to log in on their device. So for log frequency, do you want some errors or everything? Right? I like everything. So in this case, so I chose that. Do we want users to know when updates are available? Yes or no? You may not want users to know. So admins will know, users may not. And then if they're loading in a family with a bunch of types, do we want the type selector or not? I hope you do, instead of loading in everything. And then default page search, how many items to display per page before it has to reload, and image size. So that's it. You save that, and then when your new users log in for the first time, these will be the default settings that they get that can be changed after the fact if they need to. But that about sums it up. That takes care of everything for me today. I suggest if you need more information about the products at all, go to our website and take a look at Hive, and click on it here, and it'll bring you to the Hive page, and you can get more information. You can sign up for a trial and watch a couple of little videos and read some bullets on the products themselves. It's all here for you. Tells you a little bit more about content management and the dashboards and some of the project analytics that I've been talking about. And if you do have Hive and you've got it installed and this was helpful, and you've got other stuff you want to look at regarding Hive, go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/CTC software, and we've got videos all over the place for Hive. You can scroll down and look for the black and gold previews, or you can just switch over to playlists and look for your Hive playlist, or just manually search for a topic that you're looking for, and you'll probably find something there. And if any other questions come up, ask now, or send us emails at info@ctcsoftware.com, and we'll be sure to take care of you. With that said, that sums it up for me today. I want to thank you all for joining me. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate you all coming by every week, and look forward to seeing you at the next webinar.